is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy.
Yeah, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
Welcome to it on this Tuesday. It's the Steve Gruber Show. The hotline number, the Common Sense hotline, 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966. This hour brought to you in part by Mesa. Good business, good health, and great schools. Also by Sheplers, the official ferry ride of the Steve Gruber Show. Sheplers, we'll be taking Sheplers over to Mackinac Island here in a couple of days for the Republican Leadership Conference. They've got this new ferry, Miss Margie, by the way, made entirely in Michigan. I think this is an interesting. We might actually have to visit with the folks from Sheplers while we're up there because this is kind of interesting. This new boat, it's not quite ready to go, waiting for the Coast Guard to give it their blessing. But made entirely in Michigan, built at the Moran Ironworks in Onaway. It's Moran. Okay. Right there in Onaway. And they say they use as many Michigan parts as possible. The tagline for the Margie, Miss Margie, made in Michigan, by Michigan, for Michigan. Sheplers also celebrating their 70th anniversary this year, which, and everybody's seen the Shepler ferries, of course, running back and forth to Mackinac Island. Third generation family ownership. And they have a new book out, too, called Undefeated. The book chronicles the first 70 years of Sheplers, including stories of trials, tribulations, triumphs that have brought the company to where it is today, and we'll be riding with Sheplers out to see many of the Republican candidates, including Carly Fiorina and Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, and others on Mackinac Island. Let's see who else will be there. Kasich will be there. Jeb Bush will be there. Scott Walker will not. He canceled out because his poll numbers are collapsing in places like Iowa and New Hampshire. He decided to stick to the campaign trail. Donald Trump, I don't believe, is going to be there either. I'm not going anywhere, said Trump. He wasn't referring to Mackinac Island. He was referring to his campaign in general. He is the front runner. He has a message to critics at a massive sold-out rally in Dallas, Texas yesterday. I'm not going anywhere. In fact, let's just get a taste of the Donald in Dallas yesterday. Roll it.
Karl Rove. No, he's terrible. He's terrible. He's terrible. He still thinks that Mitt Romney won. He's still going around saying, I think you won. This guy raised, think of this. He ought to be in Wall Street. He raises money pretty well. He raised last cycle, the last presidential election. He raised $434 million and didn't win one race. Can you believe that? Can you believe it? And I understand it because I saw some of the commercials that he made. I saw a commercial he made against Barack Obama. And I called up, I said, who did that commercial? It's one of the best commercials I've ever seen. I got to use that firm. They're phenomenal. But I didn't realize it was against Obama. It was so good for Obama. That was the one with Germany and this. Remember, do you want a rock star? Do you want a... I said, he's not a rock star. We have an incompetent president. This is not a rock star. We have a president that doesn't know what the hell he's doing.
Anyhow, so, just it's more Trump, no question. New polling out of New Hampshire puts Ben Carson in second place, and there'll be a bit of a fall love affair with Ben Carson here. This is kind of the way the cycle goes. I don't think Dr. Carson... Well, he's just too soft-spoken for me. Now, I could be wrong. But to me, he's brilliant. And obviously has incredibly gifted hands and an incredible story to tell. But Ben Carson is and not to say this in the wrong way, but it's a little sleepy to me. I mean, why is Donald Trump getting all the attention? Because he's banging the drum. He's smashing the snare drum. And it gets a lot of attention. And it gets people to look and say, hey, what's all the commotion about? Well, it's Donald Trump. You know. And that's why he's getting all the attention. That's why he's in first place. Apparently, he's not going to be in Mackinac. Although, if he changes his mind and brings in, the helicopter, that'd be pretty excited. Anyhow, let's see here. What's Rob got for me here? I guess I've been corrected. That Scott Walker has changed his schedule. He will be there Saturday morning, according to our associate producer, Rob Burkhart. That's why we have computers here. Mike in East Lansing on the hotline today. We're going to the hotline now. Mike, welcome to the program. What's on your mind?
Good morning. I like listening to Trump to a certain extent. I like the way he went after Obama, and I wish he would go after Hillary the same way. I get a little bit disturbed when Trump and Bobby Jindal reversing the action, going after Trump, beat up on each other. I don't think there's a single need to do that. You stay focused on what you're going to do and what your plan is all about. Calling and beating up on each other violates the proverbial Reagan 11th commandment about not beating up on Republicans. And I just find it very disingenuous, and I just find it absolutely does no good when he calls, Karl Rove screwed up. So what? Why do you have to bring that up? Obama's been screwing up for 7 years. They ought to be pounding the crap out of Obama and tying Hillary Clinton to him like you tie a cans to a dog's tail. And anybody else.
He did call him an incompetent president.
Well, yeah, I know that, but I don't like the fact that he has to be bashing the people he's running against. Any one of the people that are running on the Republican side would be 10 times better than Obama, and the same against Hillary. These are very competent, qualified people, and you don't have to bash them. I like what Trump is saying. He's cutting through all the crap and getting right to the point of what's wrong with America. But he doesn't have to do it diminishing the people he's running against. He has to continually point out Sanders is a socialist, Obama is incompetent, and it's got to go on and talk about his two greatest legacies for Obama is going to be Obamacare domestically, and his foreign policy is going to be this deal with Iran. Come on. He got to be pounding that into the pavement and letting these people know what Obama has done, what the Democrats have supported, and keep delivering that message over and over and over again. He does not have to beat up on his fellow Republicans.
The problem, Mike, you have here is that too many Americans don't have a problem with socialism anymore. The problem is that, these people support Bernie Sanders, and, so you have to find somebody who you can get down the middle there. And I don't know that Obamacare is going to be the closer for you that it maybe people thought it once was. I don't know, Mike, but I appreciate you checking in. The phone number here, 888-900-9966, 888-900-9966. But we're going to talk to Jason Hart here in a moment from watchdog.org. He thinks that I am completely off the rails because I think John Kasich is a good candidate in this field that Mike was just talking about because of Obamacare. Apparently that disqualifies him altogether. We'll talk about it straight ahead on the Steve Gruber Show.
Delivering Michigan common sense with a big dose of truth and honesty.
As I explained earlier, by today's standards, the standard bearer for all things conservative, Ronald Reagan, probably wouldn't make it through the early primaries. I mean, this is a guy that supported the Brady Bill. This is a guy who, signed into law background checks on guns, just as one example that probably would have been a disqualifier for Ronald Reagan to become president. But see, in my world, there's a balance out there. And when you strike a balance, you can't have a perfect candidate. There's some things you're not going to like and some things you are going to like, and that's kind of my take on it. So here's my good friend, Jason Hart, who has been hating on me pretty well on Twitter for the past few days because I think Kasich is a better candidate than, say, Ted Cruz, for example. Jason Hart from watchdog.org. Welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, all right, your disqualifier for John Kasich and probably for I don't know others, but your hang-up is with the Obamacare expansion in Ohio. So go ahead and explain your position.
Well, I think there are two major issues with regard to Kasich's support of the Obamacare Medicaid expansion. The first is the policy itself. Research has shown that Medicaid coverage doesn't improve the health of its recipients. A big study out of Oregon was released actually back in 2013 while the governor was really pushing for the Ohio General Assembly to embrace the Medicaid expansion. And if you assume that Medicaid helps people, that's one thing. But when you look at the research and you recognize that Medicaid coverage isn't necessarily beneficial, that's a completely different starting point. But Governor Kasich has accepted wholeheartedly the premise that Medicaid expansion is a good thing, despite the research showing it doesn't help, despite the research from the National Bureau of Economic Research, also in 2013, put out a study showing that in Tennessee, when able-bodied working-age adults were removed from Tennessee's Medicaid program, they were more likely to find work. And those able-bodied adults are the same population that's covered here in Ohio under Governor Kasich's Obamacare expansion. So there are a number of really serious issues with the policy, with the estimates that Governor Kasich put out. He expected 366,000 people would enroll as of this June. In actuality, the enrollment as of this June was around 609,000. So
hold on, Jason.
Said that it would cost more than he expected, said that more people would enroll than expected. And so far, to that end, they've been vindicated by the numbers that we've seen, I think.
Okay, but let's back up here a second, because there's not a candidate on the list that could run on the notion of, well, Medicaid doesn't work and we have to get rid of it. You may well be right, Jason, but you wouldn't win one delegate based on that approach. Not one. And isn't the first part of the process trying to find somebody that can actually win the election?
Yeah, and I agree. I agree on that point wholeheartedly. The problem is when we have such a crowded field, I think that it's important to go through the list and think about what are the biggest issues that I have with each of these candidates, and are those big issues a reason to discount them? I think that in Kasich's case, there's a lot of space between let's scrap the entire Medicaid program and there will no longer be Medicaid in the United States, and let's take 500,000 plus working-age adults who don't have children, who aren't disabled, and put them on this federally funded program with new federal spending. So on top of the policy concerns with Medicaid itself, the big issue I know that I see and that a lot of folks here in Ohio agree with as far as Kasich's Medicaid expansion is the fact that he cannot discuss it honestly. He has to act as if the Medicaid expansion is paid for with Ohio money, because if he acknowledges that Medicaid expansion is a new cost to federal taxpayers, it really jams up all of his messaging about being for a balanced budget. And
Let's
hey, you guys remember in the 90s when I was a fiscal conservative and everybody trusted me back then. And so he talks about
Jason,
the Medicaid expansion being paid for with Ohio money, and it's not.
All right, so we'll put that aside for a moment. John Kasich carried Ohio with, 2% of the vote, right? Fair enough.
He actually won with 63 or 64% of the votes. Yeah, it was a landslide by any measure.
Right, so
no doubt about that.
So he is a candidate that can win the White House. He expanded gun rights in Ohio. He eliminated the death tax. He cut income tax rates by 23%, applauded by Forbes magazine, for example. See, so I guess my discussion with you is there's a disconnect here. You're disqualifying him altogether because of his position on Obamacare, which, might be a legitimate questionable spot in his record. But when you look at the candidates on whole, Ted Cruz is not electable. Rand Paul is not electable. I mean, you know this. They're not electable on the national stage. You have to find a candidate that can do it. And your governor, whether you agree with him on Obamacare or don't like his positions, or you think he's not telling the truth on his 2.5% increase in the budget and his position that they're helping drug addicts in prisons and so forth, he is a man who has proven that he can win on the national stage. And that's why I think that's the first place you start. You look at the candidates, are they electable on the national stage? And your governor, which you don't seem to care for much, is one of those people.
Well, he's certainly proven that he can win here in Ohio, but here in Ohio, his people control the Ohio Republican Party. The candidate that the Democrats put up in 2014 was an absolute train wreck. He was a guy that was well known in Cleveland, but not well known outside of Cleveland, who didn't raise a ton of money, who was then caught in a sex scandal in August and essentially suspended his campaign. So I think, yeah, he absolutely can win in Ohio. He has won in Ohio, but I think in a national race, when you have to expect that the Democrats will find someone at least borderline competent to run as their nominee, taking the issue of Obamacare off the table is the real problem that I see. It's not that Kasich caved to a Democrat legislature and went along with part of Obamacare. He wholeheartedly has embraced a huge part of Obamacare. And if you look at the numbers just released last week, actually,
real quick,
the Obamacare expansion here in Ohio accounts for 76% of the state's Obamacare enrollment. So people who have paid for a plan through the healthcare.gov exchange make up less than a quarter of Ohio's enrollment in Obamacare.
Jason Hart, we got to run.
Getting your day started with news from around the state and around the world. Common Sense Radio. This is the Steve Gruber Show.
I gotta get down. I gotta get down. Gotta get down to.
All right, it's 33 after the hour. Welcome back to it, my friends. It's the Steve Gruber Show, brought to you in part this hour by Consumers Mutual Insurance. Consumers Mutual Insurance, a different kind of insurance company. It's a co-op. And with all the confusion out there when it comes to insurance, I had to find the right fit for myself and my family. I chose Consumers Mutual here in Michigan, serving 400 companies now, 40,000 of your friends and neighbors. Find out more at consumersmutual.org. All right, so a lot of talk about, okay, so we're back to this list of presidential candidates. And if you take the Republicans and Democrats and throw them together, what do you got, 21, 2, 3, whatever you've got, a whole pile of them, right? And how do you decide who you want to go with? But according to my next guest, the two that are currently on top of the heap, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, both get a perfect failing score in leadership. Paul Mero here, the Leadership Project for America CEO. Paul, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Steve, for having me.
All right, so first of all, what is the Leadership Project for America?
Yeah, LPA, Steve, exists to identify and evaluate principled and effective American political leadership. There are so many organizations out there, political-oriented groups that score candidates, rate them. They typically do so on a single issue. The NRA is going to focus a candidate on gun rights, and et cetera. And LPA is really the first organization that I'm aware of that scores candidates not just on some basic issues like constitutional limited government, but scores them on leadership ability. So we also have criteria we use to grade candidates on their character and on their effectiveness, as well as some of the issues. And what it means is that you're not getting that typical candidate, yes, I believe, blah, 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 in whatever your organization believes, but you actually, through Leadership Project for America, can go and read an in-depth candidate profile about the candidate's, basically, the candidate's entire life, frankly, and see what kind of, get a sense of what kind of a leader this candidate will be. On top of it, Steve, is that, ultimately there's like even an X factor. Now, we don't grade the X factor, but it's like, you can look at a candidate, listen to the candidate, and you can go, nah, man, that person just doesn't click.
Well, here's my question.
As a leader.
Well, in looking at your list, I have a lot of questions, to be honest with you. And but first of all, your A and A minus group, I don't. First of all, two of them are unelectable, so the fact that they're leaders means not a lot. Bobby Jindal is not electable, neither is Ted Cruz. You might like him all you want, but I don't believe for a second that either one of those people are electable now or probably ever. Scott Walker has fallen off the map as far as his numbers go lately. He might climb back into it. So the only really viable person that you gave an A or A minus to is Marco Rubio, and I think he may have gotten the best score of anybody that I saw on your list at 93 out of 100.
Right.
But what does Marco have? And so my questions then come down to electability, and it doesn't seem to weigh into your considerations here.
Well, if it does, again, it's not. If you go to, if your listeners go to leadershipprojectforamerica.org, you can click on grades and comparisons and then roll over to also look at something called our leadership matrix, and that is the criteria that we use. You'll notice as you're reading all about the matrix that we actually do take into consideration vulnerabilities and electability. Now, in the cases that you mentioned, like with Cruz and Jindal, I think you make two excellent points. I'm not quite sure we would agree on why maybe they're not electable in that hard sense. I mean, you might disagree with some of the issues of these guys or whatever. We kind of look at it in Ted Cruz's case, for instance, even though he gets a 90, a high grade on our chart, that actually he's kind of a divisive figure, right?
He's very divisive. He's abrasive is the problem. I don't disagree with a lot of what Ted Cruz says, and I don't disagree with a lot of what Bobby Jindal says. Bobby Jindal's gotten no traction, and Ted Cruz, he's abrasive to a lot of people. He's like that guy in class. He's like one of my brothers, actually, who's always right and is willing to tell you so. And if you don't believe him, he'll get louder and louder and louder until you're convinced that he has won the argument on 125 decibels.
Right.
And that's what I don't like about Ted Cruz. He's not electable because of his personality.
Well, one of the difficulties in grading any candidate, of course, is we try to keep everything as objective as possible. The reality, though, when you hit things like vulnerabilities and electability, things become very subjective at that point. So LPA utilizes a grading team. These are individuals long experienced in politics. They're center-right kind of perspectives. We keep them anonymous for obvious reasons, just conflicts of interest and things.
Sure.
But, these guys are out there grading, and one will come back and go, you know what, we think that he's a little more electable than you think, and anyway, that's one of the reasons why the subjectivity, why we don't hard grade that vulnerability or electability.
We're on the line with Paul Mero here, the Leadership Project for America, the CEO of the Leadership Project for America. And Paul, before we run out of time here, we got about a minute and a half, not a lot of time, but you give failing grades to both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Now, Donald Trump is, rocketing up in the polls, and Hillary's campaign is in free fall, but these are still both the two leaders. If the election were held today, they would get the nominations, it seems.
Right.
And you give failing grades to both. Real quickly on each, why?
Yeah, Donald Trump, of course, we ding on his effectiveness on political skills. There's folks that would say, well, what are you talking about? He's at the top of the polls. Why wouldn't you give him a high grade on political skills? Because in terms of leadership, we don't think that demagoguery is it's a skill, but it's not a political skill of the kind of leaders that we want for America. So he gets dinged way low there. He gets dinged low on consistency and ethics and on his principles. Hillary, of course, gets dinged low across the board, as do most of the Democrats. They can't keep up on free market policies. They have a hard time on national security. They have a hard time on American exceptionalism. And in her case, she just is really struggling on ethics. So that's what stings her.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Paul Mero.
Across the board, she gets dinged.
Paul Morrow, thank you very much. Leadership Project for America CEO. You look it up online and put your scores in and give your review. It's the Leadership Project for America. It is an interesting read, Paul. I'll give you that, and I appreciate you stopping in.
Thanks, Steve, very much.
There you have it. Paul Morrow, everybody. Leadership Project for America. Check it out online today. We'll be right back.
Covering Michigan and the world from his bunker below the bridge. Here is Steve Gruber.
Come on. So I just read on the internet here. That you can prevent avocados from browning with cooking spray. Come on. Is that true? I better ask my next guest, Dr. Lori Shemeck here, Ph.D. and America's #1 fat loss expert, author of the book, How to Fight Fatflammation. Doctor, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Steve. It's great to be here with you. Thanks.
Is this true? I can stop avocados from browning because that's a challenge in my kitchen.
It is very true. In fact, I actually posted that on Twitter the other day.
I see it. I actually look at your Facebook page.
Oh, you saw it there. See?
I'm stalking you currently. See, I'm a Facebook stalker as we speak, Doctor. See.
That's great.
Anyhow, let's see here. There's a study out that says dark chocolate, red wine, and a compound could slow down Alzheimer's disease. So, I'm all right with that. I like red wine. I like dark chocolate. Not too much of it, of course, Doctor, because you don't want to get, too heavy. But,
right.
It's good for you, right?
Oh, in fact, chocolate is excellent for you, and apparently so is a compound that is in chocolate and red wine, for example.
Good news.
Yeah, so the compound is called resveratrol. It's an antioxidant, and it's highly effective in terms of protecting our cells. So what Georgetown researchers did is they took a group of about 120 people and they divided the group in two, and they gave one half of the group 1,000 milligrams of this antioxidant twice a day, okay? So they gave a total of 1,000 milligrams. And then the other group got a placebo or a sugar pill. And what is encouraging is that the group that got the resveratrol actually showed signs of slowing down the progression of Alzheimer's disease. And the group that didn't get it didn't, and they continued to worsen.
So it's, so this is a good thing.
Right.
Yeah, it is a good thing. And if you have an extra piece of chocolate because you forgot the first, it could be doubly beneficial.
Exactly. But the thing about it is, though, the red wine, it's resveratrol's in red wine. You'd have to drink 1,000 bottles of red wine to get the same effect that you get.
Well, that's probably a bit much. I've got to be honest. That's probably over my limit.
And that equates to about one bottle every 90 seconds during your day. How's that?
All right. Well, I was pretty good in college. I was not that good.
And,
in fairness.
if you eat so you'd have to eat actually 76,000 servings of chocolate a day to get that same resveratrol effect.
So what should we do?
So what we should do is absolutely make sure to get your antioxidants, and if you like taking supplements and you believe in them, then the additional support I recommend. And always go for a quality supplement. In fact, in my book, I actually recommend resveratrol for weight loss. It's incredibly important. And in the study, they showed, in fact, that weight loss did happen. And it actually slowed the progression not only of the disease, but it also showed that the participants who got resveratrol had higher skills, better self-care, and slowed cancer, in fact. So that shows you how powerful it is.
Well, sure. And I guess my question to you, and we're on the line with Dr. Lori Shemeck here, Ph.D., and she wrote the book Fatflammation because sugar is the number one inflammation-creating, compound out there, inflammatory,
right.
if you will. But doesn't it help? I mean, so you'd have to drink a lot of wine and eat a lot of chocolate, but every little bit helps, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. That's why, these natural, what I call superfoods, or what has actually been an overused term, but these foods that are packed densely with phytochemicals, okay, create optimal health. in many, many ways. And so when you get 1,000 milligrams of resveratrol, you're going to have an impact in terms of reducing and reversing inflammation in the body. Not just with resveratrol, but with other phytonutrients as well. So when you add, as I recommend, a superfood to every meal, you will absolutely change your health and begin to create optimal health.
Which is, the key.
Right.
Because a lot of people, I guess it comes down to me in my life with Ivy and the things that we do, it comes down to a balance. And I think that a balance is my mother was right. All, too much of a good thing is bad, and everything in moderation is really what it comes down to in large part. I just think in this day and age, there's not a lot of moderation out there.
No, there's not. In fact, in terms of sugar, we have, the average American is ingesting 156 pounds of sugar a day. And the food manufacturers...
A year.
Are putting sugar into everything. So people are going out buying whole wheat bread, for example. Whole wheat bread can raise your blood sugar as much as 2 tablespoons of sugar because they're adding sugar to the healthy whole wheit bread. So
and to hot dogs, and to everything. That's the thing. When you find meat products, right? Protein.
Right.
And you look at the label, high fructose corn syrup. I'm like, are you joking?
Seriously, I know it. Because they know sugar, the food manufacturers know that sugar is like crack and that you'll be coming back for more. They know that the average American would prefer to buy a sweeter tasting product than one that isn't. That's the sad news. But if we're aware of it, we can make changes.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the first thing is being aware. You have to be a label reader.
You have to.
You have to be. In this day and age, you have to be a label reader. And you have to stick to the outside edges of the store, because the outside edge of the store where you have your bakery, your meat department, your vegetables, your produce, you go to the middle of the store and bad things happen because it's all processed and it looks like food and smells like food, but really it's not food. It's a lot of chemicals and preservatives and sugar and other stuff that you really don't need. 30 seconds for the last word, Doctor.
In fact, the food manufacturers have really created slick combinations of these foods, with sugar, salt, and fat. And it has a powerful effect on the brain and what you choose whenever you do go into that store.
Absolutely. Dr. Lori Shemeck, always a pleasure. PhD. Check out the book, Fatflammation, everybody. Doctor, thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, we'll talk soon. It's the Steve Gruber Show on a Tuesday.